We're live.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Munson Steed, and this is my co-host, Terry Shropshire. And welcome to another edition of the Rolling Out News Report. We are very proud of the distinguished gentleman that you see right here, who is an example of Black intelligence, an example of a wordsmith who has put together a rationale for this moment, for this time, and forever. Welcome, Doctor. How are you?
Good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we welcome you. We think that you are totally on point. You hail from the University of Pennsylvania, and you have written this powerful book, Political Power of Protest and the Governing of Words. How'd you come up with that title? And it is definitely appropriate.
I came up with that title by just trying to consider the impact of protests. You know, when I was studying protests in my PhD program, many people thought it was a waste of my time, as weird as that might sound. They didn't believe that it had any impact. They thought that only elections mattered. But I always believed that there's power in protests. And, you know, my grandmother, when I told her what I was studying, she asked, "Why are you studying that? We already know it's effective." But my advisors would say otherwise. So I had to prove to individuals in my circle that protest was a very powerful tool to bring about political change. So that's how I came up with that title.
Terry?
Yes, I'm interested in the book, The Loud Minority. That's a very interesting take on what's going on right now, because it's kind of a play off the word that was invented by Richard Nixon's camp, the silent majority, which he coined during the most tumultuous year of arguably the most turbulent decade in America in the 20th century, 1968. So I wanted to know how do you link that and make that bridge from Richard Nixon to the current occupant of the White House and what is going on in the streets this past month?
Well, you're right. When Richard Nixon said it, he was criticizing protesters that was pushing back against the Vietnam War. And it wasn't just those protesters who was pushing back against the Vietnam War, it was also the civil rights movement. At that time, even Dr. King was telling many Black young students not to join the military because he believed it was an unjust war. And many of our Black brothers and sisters were coming home disproportionately in body bags. And so there was this pushback against the war, and many individuals felt like that term, the silent majority that Richard Nixon used, had this racial bend to it. So it fell out of use. Now, how I link it up to today, guess who was the individual who brought it back? It was
Hold on. Work with me here. Hold on, give me a second. I don't know. Can you tell me?
I'll tell you, I was going to give you a lifeline, but it was Donald Trump who brought it back on the campaign Trump, where he went around asking the silent majority to stand with him. He even had signs printed up. You could buy them on Amazon for $14.92. You got like 2 thumbs up for good sturdy paper. But you know, if these individuals are called a silent majority, I have a play on words with it. And in the other group, those who are protesting, putting forth the concerns, must be the loud minority. The disconnect, though, I think that Nixon had, and I think also that Trump has, is that he believes that the silent majority views things differently than the loud minority, those individuals who are protesting. And indeed, I believe that the protesters are speaking, they are persuading, they are convincing the silent majority to understand their concerns and to push for change.
See, now, but the thing is that according to the bio that I read, is that the president or who's ever in office they obtain office because they support the actual protest that's going on. That wasn't the case back in '68. I mean, you had, Dr. King died, Robert Kennedy died. You had the disastrous Democratic National Convention with the uprising and the insurrection. I might as well say, damn near civil war. And people got tired of that. The silent majority, as Richard Nixon named them, got tired of that. And so that's why I guess that word resonated with them in that particular year at that particular time. It seems to be the opposite is true now. Would you agree?
Well, I would say that if you look at protests on that sort of top national level, if you look at just who was elected to the presidency, then it might make sense that these contentious protests, the riots and everything benefited Richard Nixon. However, I push back on that notion because I think what's taking place today took place in 1968. The reality is that protest has a localized effect. So if you look at the places in which you saw protests in 1968, they influenced the races within that geographical region. So take, for example, Abner Mikva in Chicago, in which the civil rights movement descended upon Chicago, as well as anti-war protests. In that specific area, the Democratic machine was pushing back against protest, but Abner Mikva embraced the protest movement. He was a legal counsel getting individuals out of jail when they were locked up unfairly because they were protesting. And also many of the people in the movement were totally backing and supporting Mikva because he stood for some of the policy changes that they wanted. And sure enough, when elections happened, Mikva was able to win on the sales of the protests. Actually, if you look at the Democratic House and the Democratic Senate, they retained control of the House and the Senate in 1968. I argue that if more protests actually had occurred in 1968, you would have saw a greater change. Now you move to 2020, protests are occurring in everyone's backyard. And I think we expect a blue tidal wave that will come in this year's election.
I see. That is radical because just speculating, what I'm saying? We can't go back in time.
Yeah.
But had, say former Attorney General turned Senator Robert Kennedy, had he not been assassinated, he probably would have been able to ride that wave of protest right into the office because he was considered the heir apparent. Yeah. But okay. Now, moving on to today. Let's flash forward back to today.
Okay.
So you have a trifecta of epidemics. Okay, yeah. You have a pandemic with the virus, then you have the epidemic with the police brutality, epidemic with mass layoffs and unemployment. Yeah. So you have like a triumvirate of situations here that's choking America. So how is protest informing the so-called silent majority as well as the vocal minority? How is that impacting the elections that's taking place now in the primaries and then in a few months in November for the presidential and the general election?
That's a great question. When individuals go and they protest, they're putting their heart and souls out into the street. You can see this bubbling over of frustration with the George Floyd protests and the many protests that followed. It allowed for the American people to stop and to recognize the great inequities that exist, the great frustrations that exist. I mean, many of us in the Black community, we see this on a day-to-day basis. Even when we saw the George Floyd protests, when our minds, before we clicked on it, we said to ourselves, oh, this is another incident where a Black man or a Black woman was unfairly treated. But for many in the white community, seeing this, bringing attention to this particular issue was, I wouldn't say revolutionary, but it was somewhat innovative, and it allowed them to see race in a different light. And so what protest is able to do is it's able to bring those issues to the forefront. And there's no wonder that if you look at public opinion about race has changed. It's changed in ways in which we didn't see even in 2016, where more people feel as though the American government needs to do something about policing. The American government needs to do something about racial inequality. So it's adding salience to this issue. It's also giving perspectives. It's providing guidance for representatives. I mean, you saw the way that some of those senators, Black senators and Black House representatives are pushing forth policies that deal with policing. That's not to say they weren't fighting for these issues before, or they might not have been thinking about it, but they have a renewed energy, a renewed sort of life to come and to push forth these issues. So it's affecting those policies. Now that is in terms of, the social impact and in terms of how we're talking about it. But when we look at the elections, the protest also mobilizes individuals. You're going to see more campaign contributions going to Democrats, to Black representatives in particular. There's going to be greater turnout. If you look at 2016, even though turnout was down for the Black community across the nation, in those areas in which we saw Black Lives Matter protests, turnout actually increased, like in Minneapolis. And so we're going to see that same sort of effect that take place here. And so all of those things are going to combine together that in 2020, you're going to see Democrats and Black representatives receive a greater share of the two-party vote. So that is what protest is doing. It is the pulse of American society, and you cannot ignore that pulse, especially when we're looking at elections.
I see. Now, this is axiomatic, but I still have to ask the question.
Okay.
How is mass protest, or as I like to call it, insurrection, because that's really what this is, how is that energizing all political persuasions? Like you said in your book, that it is kind of fusing the electorate with this unprecedented amount of energy. What do you mean by that?
Well, see, what I mean by that is that I don't believe that Black protests occur in isolation. I think that, let me take a step back. The way in which people view protests is now through a political ideological lens. If you see protests on gun rights, individuals say, oh, those are conservative protests, or those protests that look to push back on us being locked down for the coronavirus. People view that as conservative protests. Protests with the Women's March, March for Our Lives, Black Lives Matter, those are liberal protests. That ideological lens allows someone who's a white, liberal Democrat to connect with African Americans who are on the street protesting. And so it's this liberal connection that's being mobilized. And so the country is moving in a more liberal direction, not only in terms of race, but in terms of a host of other issues. And that's how racial and ethnic minority protests can amplify the greater liberal push that the Democrats need to be successful. So that's the link. The link is an ideological link that allows a disconnected white individual that might not be informed of race to now embrace this liberal perspective.
But does it also provide a platform for the demagogues, for the people who like to appeal to the lowest of the human spirit and reach into the darkest crevices of the soul? Does it also provide that kind of a platform for those? Because they're out there and they're speaking. Some would say they live somewhere on Pennsylvania Avenue somewhere.
Or close to it. Absolutely, absolutely. Whenever you have protests take place, there are going to be individuals that offer a pushback. And there's going to be a backlash. The reality is that social progress does not come without road bumps, without potholes along the way. I mean, this was even the case during King's time. When King sat at those lunch counters and when he would come in and try and change things, take, for example, his interactions with Bull Connor, many individuals in that community felt that, hey, why are you coming here and disrupting our community? Go into your community. Yet still, when we look back at those protests, even those same conservatives who might say, hey, you guys are acting unruly, you're doing it wrong, why don't you do it like King did it? Well, the way that King did it was—
they didn't like it.
Very similar to what's taking place now. And the pushback is going to be there. So, I think what we are experiencing is the moment of backlash and pushback. But we have to endure this moment to bring about future change and future progress.
Okay. Mr. Steve?
Can you share with our viewers 3 things that they should walk away with your current book?
Right. So the 3 things that I want to share from the current book are as follows. One is that when you look at protests, the way that we characterize protests today has been viewed in multiple ways. Individuals sometimes, especially the conservative perspective, view protests as only violent crazies who are out in the street. And that's just not true. Contentious, violent aspects of protests are right alongside peaceful notions of protest, peaceful demonstrations. And so what we want to make sure that we don't do is mischaracterize the moment and thinking that there's just a bunch of crazy individuals out in the street protesting. So that's one, the way in which we see protests. Two, this is an important aspect, and that is the potential success of protests. Success of protests might not come in the way that we want. It might not be in the next civil rights bill, but there's change taking place. I've studied protests in terms of election outcomes, policy outcomes. When protest takes place upon racial issues, racial and ethnic minorities are more likely to push forth policies. Representatives are more likely to vote in a direction that allows those policies to be successful. The Supreme Court is even more likely to take cases that deal with racial and ethnic minority concerns. And the rhetoric, now it might not be the case for this president, but the rhetoric for the president becomes more sympathetic to racial and minority concerns. I mean, you look at Reagan with apartheid, Carter with the Black College Day marchers. Naturally, if you look at Johnson with the Civil Rights Movement, or even Clinton with the Million Man March, all of their rhetoric changed in a way that was more favorable. The last thing I'll say, and this is point 3, is that the road to racial progress can be slow. And what I mean by that is, as I've indicated before, you won't get the civil rights bill, but in addition to that, you also have to say to yourself, stay the course. You know, what we don't want to do is forego this momentum that we are seeing on a day-to-day basis. These protests that are taking place, this is only the beginning of the change that we hope to inspire and hope to see. So we have the March on Washington coming on August, I think, 28th. Those individuals that believe in change should try and make it out. But also we have to translate this movement into votes and putting those individuals in office as opposed to stepping away from the electoral process. One caveat to this is that some might feel that we should move away from elections, at least in the Black community, because the Democratic or Republican Party is not putting forth our concerns. Well, we need to stay on whichever party you decide to go with to put forth those concerns. I believe in the same way of the Langston Hughes poem, I too sing America. This is our nation, and we have to continue to push to move it in the direction that we see fit.
I see. This is not in your book, but I wanted to get your opinion about you said that racial change is often goes at a glacial pace. But the way in which this protest, which is unique, unprecedented, and it seems to have made a lot of major multinational corporations' knees buckle. Yeah. Like, I mean, they came out quickly. Like, all of a sudden, after 100 years, Quaker Oats found out. Now, they just found out. It only took them 100 years to find out that Aunt Jemima had a racist, that the origin of it is racist. Yeah. You know, the NFL, who barred and banned Colin Kaepernick, all of a sudden, the commissioner says, well, maybe Colin Kaepernick will help us to figure out the racial problems in the NFL. I mean, these corporations are buckling, at least in rhetoric. So I wanted to get your take on that. When you say that that racial change moves like an iceberg, but what do you make of the quick knee-jerk reaction of so many? It's troubling to me, actually, to see so many powerful multi-billion-dollar intercontinental corporations buckle publicly. Mm-hmm. But what does that mean?
Well, the reason why I think we're seeing this change that's immense take place, and it's somewhat different than what we've seen in the past, is because of the type of protest. I mean, you see I literally track the characteristics of protests, and what we're witnessing over these last couple of weeks are some of the most contentious protests that we've ever experienced. And what this says is that the Black community, and even many others, they just aren't going to take it anymore. I mean, it gets to a point where it becomes fed up. And individuals are using their voice in ways they haven't used it before. They're using their platforms in ways they haven't used it before. I mean, you see, LeBron James has always been a major supporter, but he's taking it a step further. Beyonce is taking it a step further. So you have these millionaires coming to the forefront, and you even have the Black community willing to say, hey, we will boycott you. We will not buy your product if you don't go a certain way. This is reminiscent of the Montgomery bus boycott that's taking place. You can see what happens there. You bring people to their knees, industries and corporations. And that's what's taking place right now. It is the fervor in the protest activity in that sort of pushback makes individuals say, hey, I need to do something about this. And so it's not only the Aunt Jemima, it's the Uncle Ben's, it's the Dixie Chicks reevaluating themselves.
Yeah, I saw that.
You know, I mean, everyone is taking a look at themselves, at their corporations, at their businesses, and saying to themselves, how do I perpetuate this inequality to the point where I got my fellow Americans out in the street protesting, out in the street saying, hey, we're not going to take it. What am I doing to add on to these sores and these scars that have existed in American history? And that, you know, is going to force you to reevaluate things. So now I'm glad, but I do also want to say that it's not really superficial. It's real change, but it's not the policy change that we also need to accomplish. So the beginning stages is great. The public opinion change is great. The way in which corporations have changed is great. Now we need government to act.
Okay. Coming to the conclusion of this discussion, which has been invigorating to me. I love as you can tell, I love these kind of discussions. I love these kind of intellectual exchanges and debates. But one of our Facebook followers who's watching the show right now, Lisa Lee Barbie, she says, and I don't know if you can tackle this, but I'll pose it to you anyway. What prevents the use of the power of the black dollar from making an impact? Now, if we saw with the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955, which took almost pretty much a calendar year to impact, but they did bring that bus system to its knees to where they had to say, okay, y'all can go ahead and ride in front. So what is preventing that black dollar, which is at 1.2 trillion and more today, than having more of an impact in the American marketplace in terms of eking out more of what we want and our desires, or as publisher Munson Steve says, KPIs, the key performance indicators that say, this is what you're doing in our community. This is what you're investing in our community. This is how many people you're hiring in that corporation. Because from what I understand, just as an example, and I'll quit after this, we buy Nike at an absurdly inordinate rate, but the number of executives in Nike and Adidas is not existent, pretty much. So why is our dollar not talking more?
Right. The dollar is not talking more because we're not using the microphone. I mean, it is as though we have, I look at King Arthur a lot, as though we have Excalibur, that sword, and we're using it to spread butter. And that's unfortunate. We have a lot of might and power in our dollar, and we have to demand more. It only requires us bringing it to the table and asking for more and being very sort of specific about what we want and what we need. So asking for more change, putting corporations in the hot seat, as we saw with Starbucks and the way they decide whether or not to have symbols of Black Lives Matter or shirts and things like that, making them answer for these inequities that exist. But something else we need to do as well is, and I want to make sure that I critique the other side, but I also think we need to have a real discussion internally in terms of how we are spending our dollar. What businesses are we propping up? What Black banks are we supporting? What Black organizations are we supporting and putting out there? I think there's a lot of power in how we regulate our dollar outside, but there's a lot of power also in how we build up. How much that dollar circulates within the Black community also matters, and that's important.
Yes, it is. Well, thank you so much for such an invigorating and informative and edifying discussion and contribution to the discussion, the national discussion on race, protest, and the triple epidemic that we are facing in America. Mr. Gillian, please tell us where our audience, where we can find you, find your books, and get in contact with you, sir.
Well, for sure. I'm at the University of Pennsylvania. You can always drop me a note or email. Also have my private website. You can visit. You can buy the book at Princeton Press. I forgot the exact name of that, but on princetonpress.com. There's even an audible version of it. So if you want to listen to it while you run or jog or something like that, feel free to go in.
Well,
Okay.
thank you for all that you've done and continue to do it. I think you're spot on as it relates to protest. The last thing I'd like to say is I think they wanted us and hoped that protesters would forget that there were tons of things on the protest agenda. It wasn't just police brutality. I don't think they anticipated the federal assault on the Confederacy, getting rid of the flag. I don't think those statues were on their minds when they saw George Floyd. I think they think that agenda was very small. It was a small protest agenda. And now they see that even blackface is part of the protest. And we're looking at Jimmy Fallon and everyone else. So I think there's a bigger memory. I think that the agenda is now getting fuller as it relates to our community. So I want to thank you. We're going to come back to you because I'd like Terry to bring him back so we can do a seat at the table. Right. I think that putting you with a few others to just have a deeper discussion about how we protest and work harder to have a seat at the table as a community and using protest. So thanks again. We really are proud of you. And thanks so much for coming on Rolling Out News Report.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Yes, sir. Thank you for blessing us.
All right. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Great discussion, Terry.
Yeah. I mean, Dr. Gillen came with the noise. I mean, he knows exactly what he's talking about. And he dissected it like a surgeon in terms of the things that we're facing and how protest is impacting the electorate, and the direction the country was moving in was troubling to many people at the beginning of the year. It's going in a totally different direction right now. Most political pundits were predicting not only a Trump victory, but depending on the opponent, a landslide victory. That is definitely not the case right now anymore. And so, yeah, he definitely identified the indicators that have changed the direction of the election. And he also gave us some historical context going back to 1968, which arguably until 2020, probably the most violent and the most volatile year in the 20th century in terms of protest. So yeah, we definitely thank Mr. Gillen for coming on from the University of Pennsylvania. But we have even another dynamic host who's been in the public eye for the past two and a half decades, Mr. Kevin Powell. He's a prolific author and activist, so it's good to see him on the scene. So yeah, we are ready to bring him on whenever he is ready, because we need for him to, more people like him to talk about what's going on, and not just about what's going on, but the best way to leverage the energy. It's like capturing lightning in a bottle. If we don't get it now, I don't see another situation where all of us who are alive will be alive, that this will happen again. This is something that's just once in a lifetime situation. So how do we capture this lightning in a bottle and use it as energy to propel us forward and make unprecedented imprint into the actualization of the American dream? So we are welcoming Mr. Kevin Powell right now. How you doing, Mr. Powell? Welcome aboard. Oh, you're on mute.
My bad. Hey, how you all doing?
I'm doing well.
How are you?
Whew. New York City's no joke. It's, we're in the epicenter of everything, but it's just I'm making it. Good to see y'all. Love Rolling Out. Much respect.
We love you too.
Terry, I read you all the time. Much respect to you. Munson, I got mad love for you, brother, always.
Always, forever.
Yeah.
Well, this is the show of the author, and not only of the author, but something that actually resonates and is relevant and relatable. But before we begin, I would like you to take just a few minutes to reacquaint yourself with our audience, to who you are and what you doing in the book that just came out and why you decided to do that. So if you could just take a minute to reacquaint yourself with the audience, sir.
Well, I mean, I'm just Kevin Powell, writer and activist here in New York City. I live in Brooklyn. This is actually my 14th book. It's called When We Free the World. I feel very blessed and lucky to be able to say I haven't gotten one book done, let alone that many. I didn't expect that when I started. And I help people, brother. I've been out here as an activist for over 30 years in New York, around the country. And it's just really deep. I've been in the middle of these protests here in New York, and it's definitely supporting folks in other part of the country. And, really encouraging folks to get out there and vote and organize and actually know our history. It's just wild to see everything that's happening. And I'm sure you both know what I'm talking about. We've been through a lot of stuff. I mean, I became woke literally when Jesse Jackson was running for president back in the day, and the anti-apartheid movement. And, we didn't know that I never could have imagined folks would be having these kind of conversations, that you would see white sisters and brothers out there talking about, white supremacy. This is wild to me. But at the same time, I think about Dave Chappelle's special 846 and why, that special was deep, man. I've known Dave for a long time, but it's like, you sit there and you watch that. I mean, and as Black people and Black men, the conversations that we have to have, and, obviously what's happening there in Georgia, Ahmaud Arbery's, those three men were, are going to the next level in the criminal justice system, hopefully. And then, obviously, Rayshard Brooks. I mean, it's, Breanna Taylor. It's deep, for every bit of progress that we've made. Who am I? I'm the son of a mother with an 8th grade education. My grandmother could not read and write, and I don't take for granted that I'm a writer. Who am I? I'm just someone who cares about our people, man, and all people, and I want to help change this world and this country. And we're in a very serious situation right now. So that's what I do.
Mustard, you want to go over?
No, Terry, I'm enjoying my brother. Just, given we social distance, we can't hang out right now. You can't be in the city. You can't be at the gathering spot. We just got to be here doing the best. So go ahead, Dr. Shropshire.
Well, I have too many questions to ask, and we don't have enough time to ask them all. But what I wanted to find out before we get into your book is the temperature. New York is normally the epicenter of a lot of different things that go on in America, whether it's corporate, political, social. If it happens in New York, it's going to impact the country. So with the triumvirate of epidemics going on, with the coronavirus, and then with police brutality, and then with mass unemployment, it seemed to just it's amplified in New York, the city of New York, and the 5 boroughs. Yeah. So I wanted to know what your temperature was, and this kind of took a lot of people by surprise how this particular situation resonated. The protest that the people in New Zealand, people in Australia, people in London, people around the world were supporting this. So I just wanted to get your take on how far you think this can go in terms of enacting and helping to actualize real viable changes, and not just another series of protests and getting mad, and then the people get convicted or released, then we go back to normal.
Well, it's interesting you asked that question. And again, Brother Shropshire and Brother Munson Steele, just thank you for the opportunity. I have been a part of so many demonstrations and movements like this. I was down in Florida when Trayvon Martin was after that situation. I was in Ferguson when the Michael Brown situation went down. I was in the Gulf Coast doing relief work for over a year when Hurricane Katrina, that whole tragedy happened. What I think is different here, a couple things. One, we have a racist, sexist, xenophobic, everything person as the president of the United States, Donald Trump. That, I believe, not only shocked a lot of white sisters and brothers, but I think it made them realize, wait a minute, we are in deep trouble. Something that Black people have known for a long time, that that we have to continually fight for justice, freedom, justice, and equality in this country. I think the second thing is just what his destructive behavior for these 3 years of his administration that he's been in office. I mean, he has no regard for anybody. We know that, And then obviously it's the pandemic, because it could have. I mean, let's look at it like this, gentlemen. We have now lost about 125,000 Americans.
Yes.
in terms of wars where we've lost Americans, and all, I think all of us can say we have someone in our family who has been in the military. I know I can. World
Yes.
War II, we lost 291,000 people. Um, you know, we are now on our way, I believe, by the end of this year, because of the neglect of this presidency, this administration, to surpassing the number of soldiers we lost during World War II. This is how insane this is. And then I think the third thing clearly is that video for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, where this white officer, Derek Chauvin in Minneapolis, is kneeling on the neck of George Floyd. And this gentleman is saying, I can't breathe, just like Eric Garner said he couldn't breathe in New York a few years back, and literally is calling for his mother, and then he dies. And I think that the combination of those things, you know, have led to not just Black people, but brown people, red people, yellow people, and white people saying enough is enough. So I think it's the perfect storm. It's no different than back in the 1950s when you had the Supreme Court decision, Brown versus the Board of Education, when you had what happened to Emmett Till, and his incredible mother said, keep the casket open. I want the world to see, you know, what they did to my son. Well, that video of George Floyd has been seen by the world, which is why you have protests from here to Atlanta to New Zealand, because people are like, this is horrific. This country that claims to be civilized and the most democratic and freest country, quote unquote, on the planet, would actually do this to a Black man.
Right. There could be no more denial that you know, I've heard so many times, there's no real racism. You know, racism doesn't exist. We've gotten past that. You know, when we elected Obama, we went into the post-racial era, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, I remember when he got elected. I remember I was on a plane and I was reading something, newspaper. We used to read newspapers, by the way.
Yeah, I still do. I love newspapers.
Oh, okay.
That's why I read Rolling Out. I love newspapers. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, that's what's up. And I remember they were still talking about, well, you know, we can retire Reverend Al Sharpton, we can retire Jesse Jackson because we've elected Obama and we're in the post-racial society. I remember that. I remember how angry I got and how irritated I got because I'm just like, they just don't get it. But with that, George Floyd, unfortunate tragedy, as the life and literal blood seeped out of him, there was no more denial. You could not deny with the, calmness by which this man did it. I mean, it was just like, he didn't care. It was so callous, so malevolent that they can't deny it anymore. But anyway, I need to get to my question instead of trying to take up your platform.
Can I, if I could just respond to two things that you said that I think are so important, brother.
Yeah.
One, the image of this officer on the neck of George Floyd. Let me make it clear, as an activist and someone who's been out here for a leader, as a leader for a long time, we're not anti-police. We're anti-police brutality. We're anti-police racism. We're anti-police reckless disregard for the humanity of Black people, of African people. That's the problem. And the image of him doing that to George Floyd is no different than white men just standing casually around a Black man dangling from a tree as if they're at a sporting event. Y'all know the pictures of lynching that I'm talking about. Yeah. That's number one. And then number two, when we talk about President Obama, we know that historically, whenever there's been any little progress for Black people in this country, Reconstruction after the Civil War.
Yes.
Backlash of white supremacy. And we know that Reconstruction only lasted 12 years, from 1865 to 1877. And then from 1877 all the way up into the Civil Rights Movement, white supremacy and terrorism. We know that with the Civil Rights Movement, 1955 to 1968, why is this important? Because as we're out there protesting and organizing and saying these things, we have to know the history. The Civil Rights Movement was 13 years, for the sake of argument, 55 to 68, when Dr. King was killed. What do we get? Civil Rights Bill 64, Voting Rights Act 65. Y'all know in Atlanta how important the South is to the progress of Black people in this country. And then what happened after that? The same kind of Black backlash that led to Ronald Reagan becoming president years later, and them trying to destroy every little victory that we had. Voter suppression didn't start now with Stacey Abrams in 2018. This was actually going on in the 80s during the Reagan years. This is when they were like, nope, we got to get rid of these folks off the, and where were they doing that? Places like Georgia, Alabama, across the South, where there's a huge Black population. And the same thing with Obama now. Whenever there's any progress, there's this almost like this fear, I believe, of some of the racist white sisters and brothers in this country that somehow they got in their minds that Black folks are going to do to them what they've done to us for 400 years when there's no example of that in the history of this country. That doesn't even exist.
But isn't that how an abuser does, or a person who's a philanderer, somebody who cheats on his girl all the time, and he's always checking on his girl? Ain't that how they act? Well, so that's kind of like an analogy there.
Well, it's a perfect analogy, Brother Shropshire, because I've always said that the relationship is an abusive relationship that we're in. You know, who's more patriotic than Black folks? Who served in every war like Black folks have? Who shows up for the Olympics the way we do? You know, who stands up for the national anthem like many of us do? You know what I mean? Who worships God the way we do? Who makes music the way we do? You know what I'm saying? Who will actually invite someone into their church in Charleston, South Carolina that they don't even know, not knowing that this young white man is about to murder 8 of them? You know what I'm saying? And then after that happened, who quickly forgives him? I'm just saying, if Black folks were evil like that, come on, you know what I mean? And so I do think what's happening is that the white sisters and brothers that you see in Atlanta and around the country who are out there protesting and saying Black Lives Matter in a way we could not even imagine, I think their humanity has been tapped in a certain kind of way. Now, the challenge to them, and I say this to all of the sisters and brothers who call themselves white, this can't be just for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. We deal with this our entire lives. Are you going to make a lifelong commitment to fighting for justice for all people in this country, or is this just a passing fad? That's the challenge.
Now, we need to get to your book. Excuse me. The essay, I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free, is, man, that is so powerful without even reading it. Because I can feel, you know, it's just like, how would it feel to be able to walk down the street and you see white people and not feel their energy, their negative energy? When you walk into like a restaurant or whatever, or a Starbucks, as I do, and they all look up at you as if they're scared. Or how would you feel knowing that if you got pulled over, you'd have nothing to worry about because you got your driver's license, you're allowed to drive, and you got your registration, nothing's gonna happen. You know what I'm saying? So that's a powerful, powerful statement in and of itself. I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. How did you come up with that?
Well, I want to shout out, obviously, I want to shout out Dionne Farris, my sister friend who's lived in Atlanta for years, one of our great singers, because she's made a version of the song back in the day. Obviously, Nina Simone made a famous version of the song, and it came from a brother named Billy Taylor, one of our great jazz musicians. He wrote it for his daughter back in the 1950s, and it took on a life of his own. As I'm sure y'all know, in the 1960s during the height of the civil rights movement. And that song, that was actually going to be the original title of the book. I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free, but then I shortened it. One of my fraternity brothers, I'm an Alpha, and he said, what about When We Free the World? I was like, word, that's it. But I knew I wanted to keep that title for the song, for the last essay, because, look at it. You're an accomplished writer, Brother Terry. Muntz is an accomplished publisher. I do the best I can out here with my little career. And it doesn't make sense that we can go outside of our home space and not know if we're going to come back or not. Just because of who we are as Black men. It makes no sense, that the Trayvon Martin go get some Skittles and some iced tea and not come back. It makes no sense that Tamir Rice, who would have turned 18 today, is out there just playing cops and robbers like we did when we were kids. We've been born to play games, and he's not making it to 18. And so until we can live in a society, what I say now, gentlemen, I don't care about being equal to anybody, because I don't want to be equal to mediocrity anyway. I want to be treated humanely. That's the real word for me now. It's not about equality. I want to be treated humanely. I want to know that I can go anywhere and not worry about getting killed if I'm Ahmaud Arbery just jogging. And I'm a runner, gentlemen. That's why I got this cutoff shirt right now. I'm a runner. And I've run in areas where I'm like, man, am I going to get killed just because I'm jogging? And then I see the video of him and these gentlemen
yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No, I understand what you're saying, man. Every time I walk to the gas station or walk, trying to get more exercise, which I haven't been doing very much. I was a member of a run club, and so I tried, but the run club has been shut down because of the coronavirus. So I tried to walk once or twice a week, and every time I go walking, I'm thinking, it's on my mind. What if this is the time? What if they stop and they try to say that I look like somebody? What if there's a car full or a truck full of racist white people, armed white people? Is that the end for me? So I'm thinking about this every time I leave the house. I shouldn't have to do that. Not in America that I defended when I was in the military and as a military cop. I should not have to think about that when I defended you and my people built you and my people made you look good and we put you on top. We made America, so I should not have to leave my house that I built and be feared for my life because we made you what you are.
Thank you for your service, first of all, brother. And what you just said, I mean, it's so bad that even when I leave my apartment, I live in an apartment building here in Brooklyn, New York. Even when I just go downstairs to the lobby to check my mail, what do? I always go back and get my wallet because my ID's in there just in case. Even when I'm not leaving my building. That's how paranoid I am as a Black man. You feel what I'm saying? Because of all the stuff that's happened. And no one should have to live like that.
No. And to go back to your equality point, I'm glad that you brought that up because I agree with what Malcolm said. He, it's just say, God did not put me on this earth to be equal with somebody else. That is a waste of a life. I am not interested in being equal with white people. Okay. Like Malcolm said, we had equality back in the continent of Africa before white people were even in existence. And we want equality today, whether white people are on this earth or not. Equality simply means that you are able to take your dormant capabilities, your dormant skills, and exercise it to its maximum potential without burdens and without barriers. That is equality. There's no such thing as equality. You know what I'm saying? Just like I can write like nobody's business, but I can't publish like Munson can. I can't write books like you can. I'm not a producer like our producer TJ is. No, we're not equal. So equality simply means freedom. We want freedom to live the American dream without any interruptions, without any wrongful barriers. And it is ridiculous to think that I want to be, my goal in life is to be equal with white people. You must be crazy. That is preposterous.
Human beings, humanely, be able to move freely. I mean, think about if Rolling Out didn't exist. Think about if Brother Munson didn't have the vision to create this. I mean, the opportunities that are given to Black writers like yourself, the spaces that are given to Black folks like myself, because we're not even seen as human beings and therefore, worthy of being in certain spaces, which is why you see Black journalists up in arms all over the country now at these mainstream places. Why you see Black folks who work in theater in New York City up in arms. You see Black folks in Hollywood up in arms because people are like, you all say you believe in diversity and inclusion, but you really don't. You're not practicing it because you don't see the examples of us in all these different spaces. Meanwhile, as you said, if you take away Black folks, you're not only taking away music, you're taking away athletes, you're taking away physics, you're taking away science, you're taking away many inventions, including the traffic light. You're taking away great bodies of literature. You're taking away great business minds from Reginald Lewis to Munson Steed. You're taking away, Atlanta. I mean, you're taking away so much. And so imagine what this place would look like without African-American people. As you said, we built the economic infrastructure of this country, you know what I'm saying? And in spite of everything that we've been through, just the resiliency of our people, which is incredible to me. And I just think that this is a profound wake-up call for this country because all eyes of the world are looking at us. I've done a lot of international interviews over the last couple of weeks, and people are like, what is happening here? And I'm like, well, what is happening it's always been here. But what Trump has done is just pulled back the curtains completely and said, here it is. He's really the Wizard of Oz. And we really don't care about, and it's not just Black folks. They don't really care about anybody because if we just look at the fact that they're cutting the funding for coronavirus testing and the virus is not over. The virus is not over, and so it's a reckless disregard for people. And I want to quote one of your native sons of Atlanta, Georgia, Dr. King, who said in his Vietnam War speech in '67, part of the problem is that we need a radical revolution of values in this country, because we believe in things that are thing-oriented, as he said, instead of people-oriented. I'm not saying people shouldn't make money, shouldn't make a living, get your house, do whatever you got to do, take care of yourself. I want to be able to be all right when I get older. Of course I want that. But I'm not going to put things ahead of people. People come first for me. That's how I think about this. But we've got to twist it, which is why you see all this destructive behavior where people are tripping about things that shouldn't be important when we should really be caring about each other. That's how I look at it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay.
That's the point of the book, by the way.
and that's a good segue to my next point because we need to talk about your book. And I don't know if I was taking up Mr. Stuck.
No, it's all relevant.
If you had some questions.
Conversation. I think it's your brother Terry. I love your passion and your genius. Seriously, brother. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Got me fired up.
No, thank you. It's just that, it's just this situation has given me an opportunity to say what has been in my soul for the last 30 years when I started being an activist in the 90s. And I was saying these exact same things, but no one was listening. No one was hearing about, just equality, like equality equal with who? Wait a minute. We're the descendants of kings and queens. They're equal with what? Who are you that I need to be equal with? You are not the criteria or the yardstick by which equality is measured. You come from us, as your own scientists say, that we are the mothers and fathers of the universe. So why do I need, if I birthed you, then I need to be equal with you? That is backwards. So, but anyway, let's get back to the book. What did you want to convey, and what is your reasonable expectations of what you would like to get out of the book, or to pick the readers to get out of it?
Well, as I said, the book is called "When We Free the World," which is kind of an adaptation of I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I've gone through a lot of personal struggles in the last couple of years, which I lay out in the book. Very deep, heavy stuff that happens to us sometimes that can, unfortunately take us out. And I've had some very serious soul searching around it. And I wanted to write something, there's a letter to an unborn child. If I'm blessed to become a father one day, what kind of world am I going to bring this child into? I talk about a very frivolous and racist lawsuit that me and my wife dealt with in Minnesota, of all places, ironically, just 2 years ago, where it was some sort of bizarre email sent to her, and I traced it to someone in Minnesota. The next thing I know, a lawyer is hitting us up, suing us for somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million for quote unquote defamation. And we literally ended up on trial in Minnesota, the same Minnesota where George Floyd was killed.
Really?
White. Oh yeah, it's the last chapter of the book. It's the essay. I wish I knew how it would feel to be free, is about the Minnesota situation and how this white lawyer named Aaron Scott used the criminal justice system in a very racist way to really shake us down for money. Our lawyer even said to us, our second lawyer said to us, that he saw you, Kevin Powell, thinking that you're a celebrity author, celebrity writer, or whatever perception he had of you, that you must somehow have Jay-Z money, and therefore we're going to sue you. And we ended up on trial, and we actually lost. We actually lost a white woman Republican judge and a all white jury except for an Asian sister. It was the most egregious thing I'd ever seen in my life. And it was so bizarre that the white sister who sued us through the white lawyer actually got on the stand and said that the email that I sent defending my wife made her feel like she had been quote unquote raped, and that this was her Me Too moment, quote unquote. She actually said this. This is in the transcript. And so I said, as a writer, as you know, Brother Terry, we have to tell our stories because these things are so bizarre that go on in this country. And so you can imagine, fast forward 2 years, when I saw George Floyd, the video of George Floyd in Minneapolis, St. Paul, I said, well, look at this. Isn't this profound? I was just in Minnesota being accused of all kinds of craziness. You know what I'm saying? And then the chickens, as Malcolm X said, have come home to roost.
Yes.
And so that the book is about, when I say freedom, when we free the world, it's like, again, are we going to treat people humanely? You know what I'm saying? And are we going to lie about people? And when you see people, challenging the statues around the country, challenging Christopher Columbus, challenging all these things that have been, like, I'm getting attacked literally as we're doing this conversation right now. I did an interview with Yahoo yesterday where I talked about the national anthem, the Star Spangled Banner, and they asked me, well, we talked about songs that could replace it. Obviously, if Lift Every Voice and Sing, John Lennon's Imagine. Well, guess what, gentlemen? Literally, as I'm sitting here talking with you all, I've got racists attacking me on social media and sending me emails telling me that I'm unpatriotic, un-American. Of course, I should go back to Africa. And how dare you threaten the national anthem? Meanwhile, Francis Scott Key, who wrote the national anthem, was born into a slaveholding family. The third stanza of the national anthem, which they conveniently leave out when people do the national anthem, actually supports the oppression of Black people. He references slaves. And on top of all of that, we know that Francis Scott Key was a lawyer in Washington, D.C., who went aggressively after Black and white people in the 1820s and 1830s who were attempting to end slavery in this country. This is who wrote the Star Spangled Banner. But because we have a lot of people in America, as y'all know, who don't read, who don't study, who don't travel, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They just make up stuff. Don't even know basic American history. You know what I'm saying? Don't even know basic American history.
No.
All they repeat is what's been given to them. Meanwhile, people like us actually read on a regular basis.
Yeah.
We actually study. We actually travel. We have conversations like this, exchange of ideas, And I would like to believe that you and I, all three of us, we're rooted in love. I don't hate anybody. I don't hate anybody. Like, I don't hate anybody. But what I do hate is oppression.
Yeah.
What I do hate is racism. And what I do hate is injustice. And so that's what the book is about. You know what I'm saying? That's what it's about.
Well, different, you know, the one thing I want us to think about, we have a section that talks about a seat at the table. I do want to say this about the oppression of Black media, Black-owned media, Black-owned media.
Yes, sir.
If Disney can write off $500 million, write off for Vice, 500 million, Kevin, written off for Vice. And we only got 10% of what they wrote off.
Right.
10% divided by the Black-owned media companies, $50 million. Puffy got what? It would change everybody's perspective in a competitive way.
That's right. That's right.
In a competitive way. I'm more on the KPIs at this moment. Terry can tell you that. I think it's absurd that you have written 14 books. You have more than proven that you should be on television, have a $2 million to $10 million writing deal so you can go away, pause, and give us your best. Our ask in this moment has to be for those companies who've given deals away. We can't erase. This is the moment to review.
I agree.
And to create new KPIs. Because for me, it's a tragedy. No, don't pay us in 90 days. Because we can't pay one bill, not your light bill, not your cable bill, not your any bill, your Spotify bill. But as businesses, small to medium, Black-sized businesses, it's 90 days. So for me, when I see a brother like you and you got 14 successful books, I'm like, publishers, what are y'all waiting for? What exactly do you need? A kidney? A lung? I'm confused because our Black intellect, there aren't 20 of you, bruh. Not 20 that have struggled, not 20 that know me. I mean, you got some special Negroes, but where is Kevin's MacArthur Fellowship? See, those are the things I'm asking. It's cool that y'all pick some people that are out there, but where is the activist that isn't obscure, that isn't afraid, that knows this community? That's my hope for you. Not that you got to keep writing a book, but you can pause and bastion in your own intellectual paradigm and smell a moment of pause. So I want to see the Kevin MacArthur fellow. That's not a big ass society, because I think they too have also focused on African Americans who are not tethered intensely into social change or investment in our community.
I agree.
And I think we've got to say that even to these foundations, that let's reassess your relationship with what is Black.
Yeah.
So that's my hope. I love all your books. That's the thing. But for me right now, social change and why Kevin has to write so much and can't pause for 5 years, 4 years, and be able to really see, world, all that is inside of him without having to write another book. 14 books in 30 years is a lot for a giant like you. That's like getting a little bit of yourself out when you really just want to sit back and talk to Dr. King and hang out with Malcolm and come give the youngins something that will alter their genetic makeup in their mind, because you know what they need. You know, no guy, people, you talking about a book, but no guys have been there and pushed for young Black men like you. Come on, MacArthur fellow, we got one right here. We need one. I need one. Terry, I know you need one. And we could get you and Terry. I wouldn't be so bad. Terry might make me alone, But when I see you, that's more of what I'm saying. I'm like Random House, doing inventory.
Yeah, it's profound.
Do a partnership.
Yeah.
Make it a partnership. I even got Apple News.
Yeah.
Apple News.
Yeah.
Make Kevin an editor and then allow him to make partnerships with Black media.
It's profound what you just said. I mean, first of all, I want to say that I love and appreciate you, and I appreciated rolling out from the very beginning. One of the things I said to my publicist, Billy Johnson Jr., we gotta always do Black media. This is what I came up in. I would not be a writer if it wasn't for the Amsterdam News, City Sun, Afro-American newspaper. That's how I got my start. So I will never forget where I come from. That's really important to say. And we have to support our Black-owned institutions. I would say probably 90% of the folks that I work with are Black individuals or institutions, and that's intentional because I want to circulate that dollar in our community, not in other communities. And I'm not apologetic about it because I know I live here in Brooklyn. There's a Chinatown, there's a Hasidic Jewish community, and they shop amongst each other, they support each other. So I'm simply doing what we did in Atlanta, Auburn Avenue, what we did in Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma, what we've done in Wilmington, North Carolina, Detroit, Washington, D.C. It's the same thing. That's number one. The number two, you're right. It is, Brother Terry, to answer your point, pivoting off what Brother Munson just said, what's the book about? I'm tired. I'm very tired. I've been doing this since I was 18 years old. That's a long time, over 30 years. And it's thankless work. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I didn't have the vision, that Brother Munson had when I was coming up in the 90s, where to start it takes a lot of courage to start a business, to start a company. Now I have a company, have my own business, but I don't do what he does. I wish I would have had the wherewithal back. I didn't, so I commend people like Brother Munson who have the vision to say, I'm going to create a platform, because that's powerful. You know what I mean? And I think that, you're right, because it's like we're out here. My mother's, my people from South Carolina. I'm born in the North, but I was raised as a Southerner in the house, and I was told not to self-brag, but I do think about it sometimes that I've got 14 books. I'm in Generation X, and I don't really know too many white folks, of any male or female, who can say they got 14 books. I don't, you know what I'm saying? And just in this year alone, I've published, I did a cover story for Washington Post magazine on Stacey Abrams. I got a couple pieces in the New York Times this year. And I just been grinding, and it feels like it's always been a grind, because it's like, that thing that you're told when you're growing up, you got to work twice as hard. And a lot of it has to do with the racism. The industry that Munson just referenced, the publishing industry, the fact that outside of Chris Jackson at Random House, there's barely any Black males in the publishing industry at all, those so-called mainstream houses. You know what I mean? There's no Black male editors, agents, literary agents at all. And so unless you have the vision of a Munson Steed, that I'm going to start this publishing company, I'm going to publish my books myself, most of us are like, wow, what do we do? You know what I mean? So you're constantly grinding, and it literally beats you down. I remember when I was younger and I would see brothers who were in media, who were in their 40s and 50s, literally dropping dead. I'm like, how did so-and-so just drop dead like that? Now I understand. It wears you down, constantly trying to make things happen. And and I agree with you, because
being an advocate for African Americans can be hazardous to your health, brother, if you are not fortified in your spirit and have enough support.
Fortified. I believe in therapy. I go to a very progressive church in Harlem. I got my spiritual healing circles. I'm a vegan. I'm a yogi. As I said, I'm a runner. I take care of myself holistically, because I think about all the things outside of us that affect Black men every single day, and Black women. But I'm speaking as brothers right now, to us as Black men, and it's catastrophic to our mental, physical, and spiritual health. And so we have to figure out ways, to win, not just survive. We know how to survive, but how do you win? And that's critical. And I do believe the answer is ownership, which is what Munson is about, and which I learned to become about, which is we have to own something, a piece of property or a business or both in our lifetime. So you have something that is safe for you, that's yours, that is away from all of this madness that Munson's talking about, where people either don't appreciate you or act like you never existed in the first place. And I've never been one to even talk about my books a lot, But I realized I started saying the number of books because people would say, "Oh, you got 2 books now." I'm like, "No, it's actually 14." You know what I'm saying? Because it's like it's also, and it's not just me. I come out of a tradition. Langston Hughes, Ernest Hurston. You know what I'm saying? Amiri Baraka, Pearl Clegg, Nikki Giovanni. I'm Maya Angelou. I'm clear. I don't exist if it wasn't for those folks. I'm real clear about that. You know what I mean? And I have a responsibility to my mama and them to keep producing no matter what, because we have to, just like y'all do with Rolling Out, y'all tell the stories of our community. I'm not just saying this because I'm on this show. I read y'all every single day. I love it when I get the alerts in my mailbox because I'm getting a perspective that is from us as opposed to these other people. Does that make sense, y'all? You feel
All
what
day
I'm saying?
long.
You know what I mean?
Kevin, we got to take you back. We're going to be doing a series called A Seat at the Table.
Yes, sir.
And we're definitely going to talk about the literature and the publishing side of this business and really creating a set of KPIs that people can get. And even to the point where you and I should talk to Medium on, okay, what's the collab? We can't just take our culture on. What's the collab? It's nice you support that. Jack, support something really Black. All right. We appreciate you, man.
Thank you.
Much
both.
love to you. Tell everybody where they can find you and the title of that book again, because we want them to find you.
It's called When We Free the World. Right now, it's exclusive as an ebook on Apple Books. Please check it out on Apple Books, When We Free the World. It'll be out in the fall as a paperback. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Kevin Powell in Brooklyn, Kevin Powell in Brooklyn. And thank you, Munson, Terry, Rolling Out. Much love to y'all. Peace to y'all.
Much love, bro. Talk to you soon.
Thank
Peace.
you.
All right. What's going on? How are you?
How you doing?
Come on. I am fantastic. Sitting here with my sister. You know, why don't you introduce yourself right quick so we can get to it? I don't want to lose any space, but thanks so much for coming on Rolling Out News Report.
Thank you. My name is Breanna Sharp, and I am from Atlanta, Georgia, but I reside now in Chicago, Illinois, and I am excited to be here with you tonight.
Yeah, well, we're excited to have you. Love Chicago. Got a spot in Chicago. So the culture is strong there. Tell everybody why you're here tonight.
So I'm here tonight because I just released my first single called Free on June 8th on my birthday. It was a gift to me, but it sounds like it was a gift to the whole world.
I'm sure.
Yes, and I'm excited because I'm here to talk about my song and the inspiration, the story behind it.
Good. And I think song is good, particularly in this moment. So share with us, where were you when you first wrote this song?
So I wrote this song last summer to be exact, August. And we had just moved to Chicago, my husband and I, in March, and just trying to transition. Chicago's culture is very different from Atlanta. So
how so?
You say how so?
Yeah.
You know, Georgia, Atlanta is country. It's Southern hospitality. Chicago, people gonna look at you. You know, you don't walk down the street and say, "Hey, how you doing?" Because they gonna side eye you like, I don't know you. Why are you speaking to me? Back home.
How did you and your husband move to Chicago? And who is your husband?
My husband is Reginald Wayne Sharp Jr. And we moved to Chicago because now we are the pastor and first lady of Fellowship Chicago.
Like I didn't know. Welcome. You know, I've been watching you. I was sharing with him how I was so proud of the transformation that has happened with you guys. It has been amazing. It's just amazing to see it. You know, my wife every Sunday is watching. I am not as faithful, and I still need to send some ties. So tell my brother I'm gonna send something his way soon. But you're writing it. I know you had to move up, but I think it was one of those moves that you know, it was in God's step.
It was.
Oftentimes, you know, you want to be in His step versus in your step. So, but where were you when you wrote the song?
Yes, I was at home and I was actually in a very low place. I believe I was suffering from a mild depression. It just really low, trying to figure out what am I supposed to be doing, wrestling with myself, fighting with myself, fighting with my inner thoughts. And that's what I talk about in the song. And the words begin to come to mind. It's all, you're all in your head. You're not good enough. You don't have a chance. And just writing down some things, some thoughts that I had been wrestling with for years. And then the word free came to mind. And as I began to write the words, it's like, wow, I'm telling a story. I'm on this journey of freedom. And the cool thing about this journey of freedom is when you're on the journey of freedom, you just don't arrive and say, oh, I'm free. I believe that it is a life journey. It's a lifelong journey where you're overcoming stumbling blocks and whatever comes your way. But you just got to stay focused to continue to embrace the freedom that's inside of you. And so that's how the song was birthed, free.
Well, I've got my co-host here, Terry Shropshire. We had a wonderful time with your husband. We'd like you to introduce your song, but Terry, you got a question?
Yeah, I wanted to find out, I think that people are leaning on their faith a little bit more than perhaps in the past, seeking refuge from the vicissitudes of life. That's ambushed us. We've been ambushed. We started 2020 not knowing that any of this was going to happen. And we've had a multitude of ills beset us. And so what I wanted to know is that what are you and your husband are doing? What are you guys, the word that you're providing in terms of how to fortify yourself with the word and with faith during these times? Because this is unprecedented. We've never seen this in American history. So what exactly there's some of the things that you're telling your congregation, your followers, your friends, your family?
Yeah. So one of the things that my husband is pushing is that we're in this together. So through this pandemic, through COVID, through Rona, whatever you want to call this virus, we're in this together. And this is the time to come together as a church family, and not only a church family, as a community, and uplift one another and encourage one another, because it's extremely hard. I mean, we've been in quarantine, since March, and now it's June and we're about to enter into July. And so as leaders of Fellowship Chicago, our job and our assignment is to encourage not only our church family, but everybody that's on board the virtual ship. That's what we call fellowship now. We call it the virtual ship. So everyone is welcome. And we're here to love on you, support you, embrace you. Fellowship Chicago has been passing out food boxes to families, over 400 families in Chicago. We've donated $20,000 to the food depository in Chicago. So we are here not just to be on a virtual ship, but we're here to serve our community. And that's something that we want to remind everybody every week, every time you're aboard the virtual ship. Know that you have a family, that we're in this together.
Are you going to sing for us?
You want me to sing a little bit of the song?
Yes.
Or anything.
This is your show. This is your time. Obviously, we want a little bit of the song. We got to have a good time. We want to lift him up. You're a songbird for us. I've heard you, obviously, when I was in church, but I want people to go listen, give you the spins. So I guess they want to hear a little bit, I'm sure.
Yeah.
CJ.
I think they were trying to play a snippet.
Yeah. Spectacular dress, by the way.
Thank you.
Shout out to the designer. Was that any particular person?
No, it's called H&M.
We didn't hear that, but okay. We'll try that again. You might have to give us a little bit of a song.
Okay, I can give you a little snippet, but you definitely can download it on all musical outlets.
Well, no, I'll download it on Spotify now.
Yes, you download it. You gonna play it? You want me to sing a little bit?
Munson?
You can play it.
You gonna try it again.
But I am more than a conqueror. My days will be greater starting now. I refuse to let these thoughts take over my head.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
But that's like getting a pinch of a piece of cotton candy. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like eating one potato chip and telling somebody you can't have another one. Just give them one chip. No, you wrong for that, Miss Sullivan.
Just give it up while you are ahead. This is what I hear inside my head. Stay in your lane. That's what you already know all about. You don't want to stretch out and possibly be shut down.
Phenomenal.
Okay, now I feel better.
Now you feel better.
Yeah. Now I feel fed. Yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. You have to listen to the entire song because it starts off one way, but it ends totally different. Some of the feedback that I've received is, you kind of surprised us on the end. Like, we didn't think it was going to end like that. So, and that was intentional. I wanted to take everybody on a journey with this song.
Well, it sounds like a big record. Obviously, the strings are there. It's not a stomping record. It clearly is angelic. Terry?
No, I thought that it was just beautiful, and it was harmonious and congruent with the visuals. So the dress and the background of the record was beautiful, and then the song itself is, you have a very golden voice, so it's soothing. God blessed you with the vocal cords. So yeah, it was touching. So I'm going to have to listen to the whole song. I'm going to listen to the whole album. So
it's just one song. The album's coming a little later. Y'all pray for me, but it's one song right now.
Well, when can your audience expect it? Your fans?
I don't know. We'll have to see. I'm gonna keep it like that. We'll have to see.
Okay.
You're not sure, so it's a single.
It's a single. Yep.
Good. We got some singles. I got a single.
Come on.
I know I'm working on my single. TJ, you got that single over there? I got a single. We just shot a video yesterday.
Go ahead. Come on, single. What's the name of it?
Trust in Him.
All right.
Trust in Him. Yeah. They just
no, and it's just I find
TJ if he has it.
It's kind of interesting, Mr. Sullivan, because as we season and as we mature, those of us who are conscious and awake, you find ourselves leaning towards things that are uplifting and empowering more than I did when I was a kid. I was all up into Tupac and Public Enemy and all that kind of stuff, and but now that I need that spiritual nourishment, because I found that I was malnourished in that area, and that the music is very empowering and it's uplifting. And so it's just like when you're a kid, all you want is candy, but when you get older, you can eat a full course meal. You need the four food groups represented. And so that's what I'm leaning towards, and that's why I enjoy gospel more than I ever have, when I was younger. Do people kind of testify in that manner? What do you find as people kind of metamorphose through or matriculate through adulthood, that they say the same things, or what do you hear from your fans?
Yeah, I hear that, the older we become, you need more nourishment, substance.
Yes.
You don't need any that surface stuff, because we're dealing with real life out here. So we want to know, and I believe the people want to know what music is out there. What are the artists doing that's going to relate to what we're going through? And I think that's why we're in a critical time now. Well, what are the artists birthing, even in this pandemic, even in the pandemic that Black people have been in all of their lives?
Hello.
What are you putting out there that's going to resonate with us? Because some of the greats did that. You know, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye. What's going on? You know, they put music out there to give us something to hold on to, and even to today, we can still grab those great hits and hold on to them because they're still relevant.
Yeah.
And so I believe that's the charge to the artists right now, to the creatives. What are you doing and what is your work saying that's going to be relevant for the times?
Freedom.
Yeah. Freedom. That's what was placed on my heart. That's what God gave me to become free. And I had no idea that God would release me to release the song now. You know, I wrote that song last year and just was stuck. I couldn't do anything with it. And now I get it because it just wasn't time. But now I'm hearing a lot of great feedback that it's really connecting with a lot of people. So all praises to God.
Yeah, all praises to the Most High. But what is it like? I know what it's like when I pen a story and the person who's written about or someone else loves it. It's a tremendous feeling. What is that feeling like, knowing that you penned the song, sang the song, helped put it together, and then it's out and people just gravitate towards it and it resonates with them? What is that? That must be
mind blowing. Mind blowing. I thought that God gave me this song for me because it was so personal. It comes from a very deep place. But once I released it, and you know, men and women, they were coming to me and saying, no, like you're literally singing my story. Like I thought I was alone. So what makes me feel good is the fact that there's a community out there for this song. You know, people are struggling. They're constantly in their heads. They're fighting with themselves. They don't think they're good enough. And they're also listening to other people who think they're not good enough.
right.
And it's not even the people that's telling them that. The people that's telling them that, they're the problems. It's not you. The people that tell you that is the problem. You have your own internal issues going on. So how dare you spread that into somebody else? You got to deal with you first before you just start vomiting, you know, negativity. So it's a blessing. I'm truly honored and grateful that God would pick me, you know, to pen this song. He could have given this to anybody.
He sure could have.
He gave it to me to share with the world. And so it's an honor and a privilege.
I know you can't wait to get back into the studio and to finish out the rest of the album.
Yeah, I've been doing some more writing. People are like, okay, this is good. What's next? I'm like,
right.
Wow, y'all don't want to let this simmer?
Can y'all let this marinate into the atmosphere a little bit?
Come on, let it sit in your soul or something. They like,
right,
all right, got it, next.
right. Folks get greedy real quick. You notice that, huh? You start feeding them. It's like a stray dog. You start feeding them, and then that dog comes like every day.
Listen,
like hold on now. Come on now. Slow down.
But that's a good thing, though. It's a good thing that people want more from you. So that's a blessing.
No, that is true. That is true. Are there other topics? You know, obviously what we're going through now, but are there other subjects that you would like to tackle through your music?
Yeah, I want to deal with. I actually just kind of wrote a song today. It's called "Just Be," and what it's talking about is basically, you know, being true to yourself. I think that, you know, when we were younger, our parents told us you could be whatever you want to be. But when you became an adult, you realize it's not as easy as they say it could be, you know, right? So the song that I'm working on now is, regardless of what people say to you, you have to stay true to yourself. Make sure you know your worth. Make sure you know what your value is. Because you have some people out here that are strategically assigned to see you go down. Like they literally trying to see you go down and not go up. And so you have to make sure you know who you are, what you were placed on this earth to do, what your purpose is, what your calling is, so you can stay true to that assignment. So when these foolish people start coming your way, you be like, oh, you already know what you are. I know what your assignment is, but I'm about to soar. I'm about to take off. So I just want my music to be very inspirational and meaningful. And like I said, have some substance, something that's gonna last.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, because I just saw this quote just the other day. So it kind of ties into what you're saying. It came from Mark Twain. He said, the two most important days in your life are the day that you were born and then the day you find out why.
Yeah.
And so I guess when people find out why they were born, then they start to live in their truth.
Mm-hmm.
And they're better able to deflect all the hate and better able to protect themselves and deflect the hate from other people. And like you said, the weapons that rise up against you, you're better able to fight that off because you have been empowered by God. You find out why you put on this earth and you start to live in your truth. And therefore, what people do against you doesn't matter as much as it did before.
Exactly. Living in your truth. I like that. Just stay true to who you are.
Exactly.
But you gotta know who you are. If you don't know who you are, then how can you stay true to who you are?
Well, you can't be true if you don't know. You can't. It's impossible to be true to you if you don't know who you are. So that's why I like the title of that song. So I'll be looking forward to seeing you release that one.
Thank you.
Perhaps you could to let us hear it right quick. I won't tell nobody.
Nah, I'm not falling for that one. No, that's still in the works. I'm gonna keep that under, the hood.
Okay, all right.
So what are your favorite lyrics in this song?
Oh, my favorite lyrics. One line says, my enemy was my enemy. That is one of my favorites. And another line says, that's not me no more. God has opened doors. I have so much to live for. I am free now. And I feel like that's a declaration. So when you're feeling low, when you're not feeling your best self, or when you feel like you're trying to go back to that old person, that old you say, that's not me no more.
Right.
God has opened doors. I have so much to live for. I am free now. It's an affirmation.
Right. I like that.
Yeah.
It's an affirmation, and it gives people the courage to be themselves, even in the understanding that when you have God in your life, there's always a transformation.
Yeah.
They talk about a caterpillar to a butterfly. It's a change. And that's the difference in actually living in light.
Yes.
And that light inside of you, and so all of a sudden, new expectations. And I think it's so timely for people because they're wanting to express their freedom. They're wanting to express the oppression right now. And nobody anticipated what's going on. And it is freedom. They're like, that's not me. That's what you did to my grandparents. That's not fair. That's what you do to the workers here. That's not fair. And I'm not going to tolerate it. You're going to see me for who we are. And I think that's the beauty of this song. I mean, I really like it. Haven't listened to it enough to love it, but then it be in my head all the time, which is a great song. So I'm sure we'll make it there. I'm gonna download it. I just got it on Spotify. But when I talked to my brother, I said, you got to come see Terry and I, because we really want to make sure that we elevate our families as high as we can on our platform, because we need young leadership. And you guys are definitely the future for so many young souls to be able to find and access the power of Christ and all of what we truly believe, building his kingdom right here on earth.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. You all reaching out and allowing me to come on this platform and share my song, share my story. So thank you all so much.
You had to come back when you get this next song or the next album, when it's a whole album, Terry. But you got to come back, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Or we can have Songbird Night. Bring all the young songbirds who are on their first album or first gospel singles, and bring them all and let them have church and song
Come
at
on,
the
Pastor.
end of the night. That would be cool. So
Absolutely, that would be dope.
Oh yeah.
the singing first ladies, that might be it. Bring all the sisters that are singing first ladies that are leading.
That's fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, we appreciate you coming on Rolling Out tonight, the news report, and tell my brother we said what's up. Much respect and love, and we'll see you real soon.
Yes, sir. Take care. Thank y'all so much.
Yeah.
you.
Please,
Peace.
Terry, take us out.
Well, I think it was inspired. What I'm taking it out is was inspired by Miss Breanna Sullivan. Living in your truth, and the fact that Mark Twain said it. I mean, the two most important days in your life are the day that you were born, and then later on when you figure out why you were born. So why you were put on this earth, what were you supposed to do, and when you find out why you were born and you seek it out and you learn it, you are living in your truth, and it's almost like you're unstoppable. So I think that living in your truth. And so I'm looking forward to Miss Breanna Sullivan releasing that song to go along with that mindset of living in your truth. And when you do, you are fortified against the evils and the haters of this world, because God will usher you through to your destiny.
Super. Thanks so much. This is Munson Steed and Terry Shropshire for the Rolling Out News Report. We'll see you tomorrow night. Peace.
Peace.